My name is Greg Holland. Good afternoon to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I am the Chief Executive of the British Chamber of Commerce here in Santiago. And as I said, I'm delighted to see you all and welcome you here today. This all started back in 2009 at the request of the British Embassy and some of the companies in the Chamber who were working in the education area decided to create an education committee as a new venture for the Chamber. The Education Committee provides a vehicle to promote and encourage the British way of educating English and the products associated with this work. Every single year, the committee delivers many activities and events in support of education and culture. This conference was launched in 2020 at more or less the start of the pandemic to enable a new means of communication against the background of many quarantines and restricted meetings and movements. The idea was to support teachers and managers and other people in the education area by taking advantage of new technology to bring high-level speakers directly to the desktops and the offices and the homes of the interested public. In this way, educational professionals could define their needs and suppliers could find new opportunities to interact. Today, we have speakers and attendees from many parts of Chile, from Latin America, and other parts of the world. I hope you enjoy this production, which has been made possible by the significant effort of 4 of our member companies, who are Cambridge University Press, Edinburgh University, Cognita Chile, and the Chilean Neurolearning Association. The Chamber will continue to support this wonderful initiative and continue to look for new and innovative ways to add value to our members. And now I'm going to pass the baton and the word to our President of the Education Committee and also Country Manager for Cambridge English, Lillian Turi. Lillian, over to you.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Greg, and thank you for your words. Welcome today to our 3rd conference on bilingual education. Now, I know that I'm country manager for Cambridge University Press and Assessment in Chile. And I'm really, on behalf of this committee, I want to thank you all for attending. As Greg mentioned, our main purpose when creating this initiative was not only to support our teachers and managers, but to provide you with a common space where you can learn, reflect, and share your experience and knowledge, and in a way contribute to give our students and even our people the opportunity to use English as a tool to improve their personal and professional lives. Last but not least, we would like to thank you all for making possible through your enrollment the fund scholarships for teachers working in poor districts in the LATAM region to participate in the certificate in teaching methodology for bilingual education starting now in October. So now we would like to give the official go to this much awaited event, but by letting our first moderator, Andrea Rodriguez, introduce our first talk. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Rodriguez, and I'm an academic consultant for Cambridge University Press and Assessment. Today, I have the honor to introduce our first speaker, PennyUr. She has 30 years experience as an English teacher in elementary, middle, and high schools in Israel. Now retired, she has taught MA courses at Oranim Academic College of Education and Haifa University. She has presented papers at TESOL, IATEFL, and various other English teachers' conferences worldwide. Her books include Discussions That Work, 5 Minutes Activities, co-authored with Andrew Wright, a course in language teaching, grammar practice activities, vocabulary activities, a course in English language teaching, and 70 tips for teaching vocabulary, all published by Cambridge University Press and Assessment. Today, Penny will talk about inclusive teaching, addressing the needs of different students in the English lesson. As teachers, we know our students differ along a multitude of different parameters: language level, ability, personality, interests, linguistic and cultural background, and many more. It is very difficult, particularly in large classes, to address all their needs. This talk will explore some of the issues and suggest a number of teaching strategies illustrated by practical activities that can help us provide learning opportunities for a range of different learners. Let me tell you that during the conference, the cameras and mics will be blocked for the presentation, so we will ask you to write your questions in the chat box. Without further ado, let's welcome Professor PennyUr.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, everybody? I hope so. I'm sharing my screen. Andrea, could you just tell me if the screen is visible to everybody?
Yes, yes, we can see it. Yes.
Great. Okay, so you can see the first heading, which says inclusive teaching, addressing the needs of different students in the English lesson. I'd just like to say it's a pleasure to be participating in this event. Thank you very much for inviting me. I've been to Chile lots of times and I love talking to Chilean teachers, so I really feel at home. I'm just sorry we can't interact in the present format, but I look forward to seeing your questions either in the chat box or in the Q&A tab there. So I'll answer questions at the end. I'm sorry I won't be able to relate to your questions during the session itself. Okay, it's now 22. I don't know what the time is with you. Here it's in the evening. Here it's 20 to 9 in the evening. So with you, it's what, 20 to 2 in the afternoon. And I will speak for about 40 minutes and then leave hopefully 10 minutes for questions and answers. Okay, so first of all classes are heterogeneous. All classes are different. They're different people. The only class which is not heterogeneous is a class of 1. As soon as you have a class of 2, you have a heterogeneous class. You have lots of different people. Some are more heterogeneous than others. Some problems, and some of them Andrea already mentioned. Providing for learning for all. The problem is also maintaining a supportive classroom climate for everybody, where some have different needs from others. Arousing and sustaining motivation, maintaining discipline. I don't know if you have discipline problems in Chile. We have quite a lot of them where I teach in Israel, and where the classes are very mixed. This can be a problem because some of the students may be bored because the material is too easy or too difficult. And therefore you sometimes get problems of classroom discipline and control. Adapting materials is a problem. Because the materials, our textbooks tend to be sort of pretty homogeneous, as it were. They're addressing one particular kind of student, and I'll give some suggestions how we can adapt later. Choosing appropriate pace, which is not too fast or too slow for the different students. Reaching the individual, and finally assessment, which is a real problem. It's the only one actually which I shall not be addressing in this session. I'm not very good at assessment. I'm not really an expert on assessment. I'm more an expert on classroom process teaching during the procedure of teaching rather than teaching learning rather than assessing later. Of all these, I would say the most important is providing for learning for all. And I will relate to the other issues here, but mainly I'll be focusing on the first. I'm a teacher, and what interests me is getting the students to learn. That's my job. As I said, I will not be relating to assessment in this particular session. First question, can the literature help us? Went to the internet, looked up some articles, looked at the journals, and the answer is not very much. They give advice like differentiated instructions. They give advice like these 10 items here. If you read through them, they're not actually terribly helpful. Number one, for example, know learners' strengths and weaknesses in English. Well, that's pretty obvious. In any kind of class, you need to know your students, their strengths and weaknesses, and so on. If you look down, I'm not going to read through them, but glance through them, they're not terribly practical. They don't help very much. A bit theoretical and generalized, and some of them I don't even understand very well. I'd like to just look at number 3, make differentiation manageable for the teacher. I think this is a key thing. How am I going to cater to the needs of the different students, but still make it manageable for myself in the limited time and resources I have? For example, some of the things I found on the internet were make available simplified versions of the text. You've got to, what do you got to do? Simplify the text, find a simplified version. It's all extra preparation work. Or use learning stations. I don't know how many of you have tried using learning stations, but setting them up and monitoring them is an enormous amount of work. Design differentiated tasks. Again, extra preparation. Add glossaries. Something else you've got to do. Provide individualized instruction for weaker learners. Well, I've got to find time to do one-to-one individualized instruction for my weaker learners. I don't have the time. I'm certainly not paid for it. And it just doesn't seem very practical. So all these don't help very much. And that's the sort of thing you get in the articles and websites I looked at, and it threw me back onto my own resources. How can I, as a teacher, provide different levels and different types of tasks to the different students, different levels of students in a class, without all this enormous amount of preparation, which I don't have. I don't have the time to simplify text, to add glossaries, to design tasks, to make up learning stations. And this is really where this session started, why I decided to plan and design the ideas in this session. What I want to look at is some practical principles, including the underlying principle and examples of how to implement, which do not demand exorbitant preparation time, which assume little or no extra preparation time. So, okay, the practical principles I'm going to look at are these: individualization, personalization, which is not exactly the same thing. I'll explain the difference in a moment. Collaboration, open ending, and something I call core plus optional. Start off with individualization. What individualization means is adapting a task so that different students can all do it and succeed. Students at different levels and different speeds and so on. And I don't think you need to write different tasks. But what you do need to do is think about how you administer them and what you demand from students to do. Let's look at questioning, for example. Questioning, a language exercise, you have a 10-item vocabulary or comprehension or grammar exercise, and you do it in class. The conventional strategy, which we've all used, I've used it myself, I'm sure many of you, is the conventional teacher-student ping pong. The teacher reads the first question. Question number 1 is this: raise your hands. The teacher nominates a student to answer. The student answers, the teacher corrects or confirms, and moves on to the next question, the sort of classic classroom interaction which everybody knows. But the problem with this very conventional procedure is that only one student is activated at a time, and the others may or may not be active. Students have no choice, no flexibility, and they, as regards the order of the question or which question is to be answered, or how much time they have. The teacher decides how long they have to answer. And some students are excluded from the process. And as we all know, during a ping pong like this, some of the students just opt out or start looking at their cell phones or just don't participate. And it's problematic because you only, typically you'll only get a small number of the students participating, and students who are at or above the level demanded by the questions. Strategy 2, I'm going to suggest a slight adaptation. I'll come on to strategy 3 in a minute, but strategy 2 is moving towards a more inclusive process. Students read the questions quietly first. And then the teacher tells them, you don't have to answer them all. This is a key comment. I don't expect you to know them all. I want you to do as many as you can. Choose one you know the answer to, raise your hand, and I will check what you say. And the students here are choosing. They're released from the feeling that they should be able to know them all. And they can choose one they can succeed at. They choose the order in which they do the questions, not the teacher, which is quite a key point. Strategy 3 goes even further. Strategy 3, I say, okay, read the questions and you don't necessarily need to do them all, do as many as you can. And what I want you to do is, with a partner or on your own, answer as many as you can. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes, do as much as you can. And then I'll display the answers on the board and you self-check. Now, strategy 2 and strategy 3 already are individualizing in the sense that they're giving the students a lot more choice as to what they do and how much they do. So let's just summarize what I've said in the form of 2 columns. Conventional question answer in a class where the teacher determines how much time for each item. And in a more inclusive framework, the students take the time they need. They decide when they're going to answer what question, how much time they need. Questions are done in the order decided by the teacher, as opposed to students can choose which order they do the questions in. The teacher implies students have to do, i.e. know all the questions. The student, as opposed to the teacher, implies it's okay not to know, which is really important for the weaker students. It's good to know that I will answer what I can, but it's okay if I don't know everything. Students are expected to do all the exercises, as opposed to students are expected to do as much as they can. Students work individually. Students work individually or collaboratively. If you remember, in the strategy 3, I said, you can work with a partner if you want to. Some students prefer to work on their own, and some students prefer to work with a friend, and it's important to give them the choice. Conventional student responses are checked by the teacher. More inclusive students check their own answers against a feeling of autonomy, independence, and then if they have any questions, they can ask the teacher, but at least the first checking is done by them on their own. Example 2 of an individualized procedure, something called pass it round, where you have sheets of paper with some kind of task, which has multiple opportunities for responses, 10, 20, 30 different responses. Each student gets the same questions on the same paper, but each of them has their own paper, and they choose which they want to answer. And typically I'll say, answer 4, and then raise your hands with the paper. Someone else who has finished another 4 will exchange with you. You write another 4 and so on. Here's an example. This is opposites, right? Write in 4 opposites, any 4 opposites you like. And you'll notice that some of the words here are quite difficult and some of them are quite easy. So they cater to different levels. they write in 4, they raise their hands, they exchange, and then the next student who gets the paper writes another 4, raises their hand again, and so on. And here, this is what I've just said, but written out in on the screen. Incidentally, you will be able to get this PowerPoint presentation after the session. It'll be available to you, so you don't need to photograph screens or take notes. You will be able to see all this later. There's a lot here, and it's difficult to keep track of it if you're trying to take notes. And then, of course, I will show them the answers, and then if there's any other answers they have, we can talk about them. But the advantage here is, first of all, they have the choice, again, the choice of which to do. Notice there were no numbers on the page. So they can choose which they do. They can choose how, can't choose how many, because they have to do 4 or up to 4. But it's a legitimization of not knowing. So if I don't know one, I don't have to answer it. I answer the ones I know, not the ones I don't know. And when I get my next paper from my classmates, I will see on the paper ones they've answered which I didn't know, and therefore I will learn from the others. I can work at my own speed, and not if it takes me longer. I just, when I finish, I raise my hand. I don't have a set time which I have to finish. It's success orientation, because I either succeed or I succeed more. There's no failure here. I'm collaborating with my classmates rather than competing with them. And what is important is that all the students are actually occupied all the time. They're learning all the time, full participation. So it's a really nice procedure, this one. A variation of the process is, instead of saying do 4, you say do as much as you can until I say stop, 30 seconds. Then I'll say stop, exchange, do as many as you can, stop, exchange, and so on. So also ensures that everybody is working all the time. And they're not, they don't feel they have to do a certain amount in a certain amount of time. Moving on to my next practical principle, personalization. Personalization is the adaptation of tasks to allow for expression of personality, personal experience, opinion, or whatever, my favorite something, or what I remember about something, or my opinion about something. Affirming the right to be different and valued. So I'm not really looking at level here or language. I'm looking at people, students as people, and why they are different, and affirming their right to be different, and to respect and to learn from each other. So allowing for contributions that reflect all these things that you can see on the screen there. My favorite, I remember, agree, disagree, things like that. These are all personalized tasks. So you'll see the big difference between personalization has to do with personalities and different people in the classroom, and individualization, which has to do with level, proficiency, speed of work, and so on. An example of a very elementary kind of inclusive activity which relates to personality is this one here. I asked the students to choose, if they were 4 years old or 5 years old, and the parents said you can have any pet you like, a cat, a dog, or pony. It can be big, small, or medium sized, or it can be black, white, or brown. Which would you choose? And each student chooses one, so one item in each of the columns there. And then the mingling works as follows. You say, having decided which kind of pet you want, you get up, you mingle in the class. In other words, you walk around the class and talk to other people and try to find someone who wants exactly the same pet as you do. If you find one, see if you can find another. And they are, again, talking all the time, engaging with the target vocabulary all the time, but with a task which is really quite fun to do. It's very nice to do in the classroom. I'll show you an example of the same thing at a higher level. Sort of B1 level class, say you ask them to write down quietly on their own one chore I hate doing, one place I would love to go to, and something which really irritates me. And then again, they get up, they walk around the class and see if they can find other people who feel the same as they do. And again, it's a lot of talking and relates to the students as people, their tastes, what they feel. It's also a very nice sort of solidarity activity or ice-breaking activity to do with students. And also at an advanced level, what is the best metaphor for a lesson? And again, each student expresses their own feelings, their own opinion about what is a lesson, what resonates, what metaphor of all these here resonates with me. And people very rarely choose the same as the person sitting next to you. If you ask them to discuss with the partner what they chose and why, you'll find that they rarely chose the same, so they exchange ideas about what they chose. And even if they choose the same thing, it may very well be for different reasons. So it's, again, it's a nice one, dealing with different personalities and seeing where different people are coming from in their opinions. My next, my third practical principle here is collaboration. Collaboration means learners working together in order to get better joint results than they could on their own. It's not exactly the same as group and pair work. I'll show you why in a moment. Enables, if you have collaboration, makes more students to be activated simultaneously, enables peer support. And there are two types. One is full class sharing, which includes things like a class brainstorm. And it could be orally, and if we're face-to-face, then the easiest thing to do is orally. I'll give some examples of brainstorming later. Or if you're working online through Zoom, you can brainstorm through the chat box. Pass it round is full class sharing. It's collaboration, as I mentioned when I displayed this, the activity of Pass It Round. It also involves, I gave it as an example of individualization, but it is also collaborative. And lots of ways of sharing online. Okay, I don't know how many of you use Padlet or Wikis, other types of sharing online where students can respond online to a stimulus of some kind. Pair or group work is various types. First of all, collaborative pair group, where the pair or group are working to try and do something together. I'll give an example in a second. And mingling, as I mentioned before, is also pair or group work. It is what it's sort of making and breaking, meeting someone, discussing, do I want the same pet as you? Do I hate the same chore as you? And then breaking up and then meeting with someone else. That is mingling, and it is also clearly collaborative pair or group work. Here's an example. I'm giving this, I'll show you why I'm giving this example now. I can't unfortunately demonstrate it with you, I'll have to describe it, but I hope it'll be clear. It's what I call recall and share, and I use it to help students remember the spelling of tricky words, sort of A2, B1 words, which the students find it difficult to spell. And the task is this, I put them up on the screen or write them up on the board and say, you have a couple of minutes. Don't write them down yourself, just look at them and photograph them in your mind and see if you can remember as many as you can. There are 10 items here. I'm going to ask you, sort of Kim's game, I suppose. I'm going to ask you, when I take them off the screen, to write down as many as you can. I then erase them or take them off the screen. And they write down as many as they can. And if you do this in class, what you see is that after a couple of minutes, the students start raising their eyes to the ceiling as if they're looking for the words on the ceiling. It means that they've remembered as many as they can. And when you see students raising their eyes like this, you say, okay, you've remembered as many as you can. Share with a partner, person sitting next to you, or maybe people sitting behind you as well, and see if together you can get up to, if not the whole 10, then maybe 8 or 9 at least. And after they got as many as they can, I display the words again, and they check. And first, it's a very effective way of teaching or reviewing vocabulary and spelling. And secondly, it is a very good use of collaborative group work. Notice that in this case, students do what they can. They help each other do better. And again, as I mentioned earlier, what is really important in these inclusive strategies, everyone is activated all the time. They're busy all the time engaging with the target material. Not all tasks are good for pair and group work. Collaborative work is not a good thing in itself. It's good if it achieves a learning or educational goal in itself, but not necessarily good in itself. It's good. What is not so good, I found, is that if you ask students to do a grammar exercise or write a sentence or paragraph in groups, what happens is you find that one student or maybe two are doing all the work and other students are not doing anything or doing very little. And it's not really collaborative at all. Much better is the kind of tasks which clearly a group can do better than a single person. For example, recalling, as in the example I just gave you. Always, and it doesn't matter how advanced or not advanced you are, always 3 people will be able to recall more than one of the recalling task. And same with pooling ideas or brainstorming. If you have a larger group, they will have more ideas than will a single person. So these are good bases for group work. Coming on to my last 2 practical principles here. This one is open ending. And what it means is designing or adapting questions so there are many possible right answers, not one right answer. One right answer is, by its very nature, non-inclusive. There will be, if you have one right answer, then one person answers, and the rest of the students can't do very much with it. If you have lots of right answers, then you have many more possibilities of responding. So let's look at some example. Let me just clarify a point I just made. If you have many possible right answers, then firstly, more learners get to respond. So it's just, you're getting more learning. And they can respond at different levels. And this is the key point, that you can have easier answers and more difficult answers. So you are covering a wider range of ability levels. Weaker, shyer students can use responses from stronger, more confident and models. If one student has answered, that's not the end of the question. You've got lots more possible answers coming up, and the weaker or shyer students have opportunities to think about what their more confident peers have already said, and think about something which perhaps they could contribute at their level. Just to give an example here, if you've been to my sessions before, then you'll know this one, because one I always use. Jenny is a baby. Jenny can or can't ride a bicycle. That's a closed-ended question, practicing can and can't, and they have to say what the right answer is, and the right answer is Jenny can't ride a bicycle. But that's it, you finished. Nothing much more can do with that. And a student who is weaker and doesn't know what a bicycle is, or hasn't really got control of the modal can, either may answer it wrong or probably won't do it at all. If, however, you make it into an open-ended question, like, for example, Jenny is a baby. Jenny can't ride a bicycle, but she can smile. What else can't Jenny do? And invite students to brainstorm sentences with Jenny can, Jenny can't, as they wish. So a more advanced student might say something like, Jenny can't open a bank account, or something, or Jenny can't drive a car. A less advanced student may say something like, Jenny can cry, or Jenny can eat, or Jenny can't swim. And you've immediately opened it out to practicing your target grammar at a level which is adapted to the needs of different students in the class. Here's an example of open-ended vocabulary practice. Very often, vocabulary exercises are gap fills or matches where you have to fill in the right answer of a particular set. And there's one right answer, one right match, or one right item to fill in a gap in a sentence or in text. It's much better, perhaps, to take the target. This is just a random target set of nouns in this case. Or I could have used the set which I used in the recall and share earlier on, but here's a set. I say, it's much better to say, make a sentence, your own sentence, and you can make a simpler sentence or an easier sentence, which is fairly simple and easy to do. And I would take it a step further, and here's some suggestions for making it a little bit more challenging and fun. Here's the items at the top there, which I've just shown on the screen. And make a sentence with any two of the items, just a little bit more challenging and more fun. Make a true sentence about yourself. We're going back to the personalization again, remember, which is also one of the aspects of teaching inclusively. Make a true sentence about yourself with any of the items. Make a false statement about something which is clearly not true, like the sun is cold, something like that. Make up a story in groups, pairs, including all the items. So you put them into groups and say, okay, tell a story between yourselves. Each person can add a sentence as you go around and try to include all the words in your story. If you do this in class, they start laughing after a while, because in order to make a coherent story, they have to make all sorts of extraordinary events in order to account for the different items in the list there. Or add an adjective to any of the items. Again, it's a sort of brainstorming, open-ended task. All these things are variations on the make a sentence with, but they are, as I say, they have this key quality of being open-ended and therefore affording possibilities to students at different levels of working at different speeds with different ideas. You can make closed-ended textbook exercises into open-ended one. Most of the exercises in your textbook are closed-ended. One right answer, say the gap fills or multiple choice or matching or completion exercises, which have one right answer. Here's a typical example. Excuse me. Practicing the past tense. Okay, so they have to write, she left early, he made the cake, I sat there for 6 hours, the man read the book. One right answer, pretty boring, doesn't get you very far, and it's not really useful for a very heterogeneous class. You have to be willing to change the instructions a bit. So let's say, supposing we say, delete the end of the sentence, and you have to use the past tense, which is my target item here. She left. Give me an example with she left, but not early. Give something else. So they come up with things like she left the house. She left late. She left her husband. She left. There's all sorts of ideas they come up with, and they are getting, firstly, they're getting a lot more practice with left, which is my target item here. And they're also getting the open-ended, different levels, different ideas, responses. Another possibility is to delete, that's the one that I've just, sorry, I should have skipped that slide. Let's go on to the next one. Next possibility is to delete the verb and move on, having done it originally the same way you started. But in this case, I'm giving them opportunities to have exercises using different past tenses. And the less advanced students will use easy ones, and the more advanced students will use more difficult ones. So if I say, he the cake, so, okay, it comes out like this. So some students will say he, more a simple answer would be he made the cake, he ate the cake, he saw the cake. More advanced students might say something like he burnt the cake or he baked the cake, and you're getting a lot more variation and possibilities of working at different levels and with different ideas. In principle, what you have to be willing to do is what I call mutilate the textbook. Be willing to delete things or tell students to ignore things, delete part of the exercise text, for example, the option in parentheses, which is what I did this time, or delete the word bank of a gap fill, or delete multiple choice options and just say, decide on your own options. It's just a question of being willing to be flexible with the text in the textbook. One of the columns of a matching exercise. Other possibilities for open ending, any kind of brainstorm. Okay, I'm not going to read these, I'll just put them on the screen and you'll see the kind of things which you can do when you create an open-ended activity. How many ways can you think of to do something? How many adjectives can you do with a noun or adverbs with a verb or whatever? Lateral thinking is rather more ambitious. It's thinking outside the box. Instead of comparing a car with a train, which is fairly obvious, you'd say a tree with a piece of spaghetti, which is totally unobvious, but they come up with some quite interesting comparisons using the comparative adjectives. And things like these. Interrogatives, the third one, thinking of questions to answers instead of the conventional answers to questions. And again, it's brainstorming and lateral thinking. Or advantages of things normally seen as disadvantages, or writing negative sentences about some imaginary situations. So these are all things one can do with open ending, from adapting a textbook to making up your own brainstorming activities. And here's a last one, which I forgot to put up. Say 4 nice things about your friend using negative sentences. So it challenges them a bit and it's quite fun to do, but again, open-ended. Finally, my final practical principle is core plus optional. What this means is that the class is given a core task, which is compulsory, until everyone has to do this, and I make sure that it's easy, plus an optional task, which may be done by some if they have time, if they are able, it's more challenging. And the key words in the instructions are things like do at least. So do at least this, and if you have time, do that. Here's a conventional textbook exercise, which categorizing. And the conventional instruction is write the items in the appropriate column. And what I'm suggesting for core plus optional is that instead of saying write the items in the appropriate column, you say find at least 3 things to put in each column, more if you can. And then you're setting the success level at a level where all the students can succeed, but you are at the same time challenging the more advanced students to do more, and even, you know, some of them come to me at the end and say, I've done it all, what shall I do now? I say, okay, find some more words of your own to put in any of the columns. So it's really, really flexible, and provides learning opportunities for different levels. You can take any textbook question and make it textbook exercise, make it core plus optional by giving this kind of instruction. Answer at least 4 of the questions, more if you can. Write at least 1 paragraph, more if you can. Read at least 1 page, and so on and so on. Tests, bit controversial this one, but I've done it and I liked it. Most of the test is compulsory, a classroom test on vocabulary or grammar or something, and is given a grade out of 100. A final section is optional and gets bonus points. So here's an example which I gave to one of my classes who were doing the practicing being tested on past tenses, and I asked them to fill in. This was the last section of the test. It had all sorts of other sections as well. The last section asked them to fill in the gaps in Little Red Riding Hood story. And then there was an optional section at the end, which says, if you have time, finish the story as you like, but not the same way as usual. And I always like to finish off this talk with this story, because it's a true story. So I gave it to a class, a 6th grade in Israel, and one of the little girls wrote, the wolf went off through the forest and came to the grandmother's house and knocked on the grandmother's door, and the grandmother said, come in, and the wolf went in, and the grandmother said, oh, it's you, my dear little wolf. I'm so glad. I thought it was that awful Little Red Riding Hood. And you know, you sometimes get a bonus like this, which is really fun to read, and gives an opportunity to the more advanced students to show what they can do and use their imaginations. And that's it. Here are the references. You'll see them when I send you. I'll send the PowerPoint to the organizers, and thank you very much. And there's my email, and I'm willing now to answer questions or respond to anything anybody would like to say. So Andrea, over to you, and I'll close the screen.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you for such enlightening talk. Actually, I was wondering, because at least here in our country, we have several issues with the topic inclusive classroom, because usually we have very crowded classes. I'm thinking about 40 or 45 students per class. So sometimes it is very difficult to include inclusive strategies because of the crowded classes. What can you suggest in that case?
Of the strategies I suggested, I think almost all of them could be done in crowded. I've done them in large classes. Which one would you think would not be able to be done?
Well, actually, it's not that I don't think that they can be done. The thing is that one thing is the theory and the other thing is the practice. I mean, sometimes...
Yes, I mean, that's why I suggested practical activities. And I've done them in classes of not 40, but certainly 30.
Okay.
And I think most of them are practical. It's perhaps a little bit more difficult to do the mingling, because you simply don't have the time, don't have the...
Yes, or to monitor, or to monitor all of your students. I mean, that's the thing.
Right, now here we have an issue about monitoring.
Yes.
And here I think we may have a problem of principle, because I don't think that you necessarily need to monitor all what's going on all the time. I would rather have the students activated, even if they're perhaps making mistakes here and there that I don't pick up because I can't monitor, but I would rather have them doing things, mingling, talking to each other, than have a single ping pong, which is what I demonstrated right at the beginning, where I can monitor everything, but 3/4 of the class aren't doing anything at all. So it's a question of a balance of what I, as a teacher, think is important.
Yes, well, Maria Ignacia Brieva says, personalized education, we have so much to learn about it. And actually, I wrote it down because I think you mentioned something that I think it's very important. And you said the right to be different and valued, because I think that making our students confident is a key issue. I mean, it's something that we must do. I mean, to make them feel confident about their learning and about learning a second language, which is usually a bit more difficult, right?
Yes.
And we also have Constanza Godoy, who asks, the inclusive strategy, I wonder if it can complicate the teacher's need to monitoring again, their learning process as students are in charge of checking their own answers. What do you advise to do in this case?
Yes, I said before, you're quite right. It comes at a price, and it's a payoff. So you have to decide, am I going to give more flexibility to students to check themselves and work on their own? Or knowing that I will not be able to monitor everything, or am I going to monitor everything, but then not give them the opportunity to work on their own? It's a payoff. You can't have both. And you have to decide which is more important at any one particular point in your classroom process. So yes, the strategies that I'm suggesting here do come at a price that you can't monitor everything. I think it's worth it.
Yes. Well, Tamara Enriquez says, so many new ideas. Thank you very much. Actually, many people are thanking you for all of the tips. And it is true that probably it is easier to work with small groups, but in our reality, at least in our country, I mean, things don't come that easy. But I believe that actually most of it, if not all of the tips that you mentioned, I mean, can be done. I mean, it is something, I think it's something that it's totally worth trying. And I don't know if there are any more questions. Let's see. Well, actually, do these strategies work with students with SEN? I don't know what that, I don't know if you understand that question.
Needs.
Yes, I think so, yes.
Yes, I think there comes a point where a classroom is, where you have the differences between students are so great that even the strategies I'm suggesting will not cover them all. There's a limit. I mean, my ideas can help up to a point. Students with special educational needs, students who have ADHD, have attention deficit problems, or problems of hearing or sight impaired. These are things which my ideas will not cover completely, and I am aware that there are limitations. What I'm suggesting here is ideas which can help. They cannot solve all the problems, and it will depend on the teachers, your own teaching judgment and situation, how and how far you use them.
True. I totally agree. Well, Isabel Martin says, thanks a lot, dear PennyUr. I'll try all of your ideas. Some of them I've already done. They really work. And Lindsay says, what do you think about large classes being divided into levels?
If you have the ability to do that, it helps. It certainly helps a lot. But then you have to be very flexible about allowing the students to move between the classes, okay? Because you don't want them to find themselves labeled as lower when actually they could be higher. So have to be very cautious about not letting them be stuck in a class which is wrong for them. On the other hand, it does make things a lot easier for the teacher if the differences are not so great in level between the different classes.
And do you think that those students that are more advanced can help the weaker students somehow?
Certainly
Do you think
can,
that?
yes, and I think this is one thing which happens as soon as you do group work, or collaborative work, or in any of the types of collaboration that I was looking at, there are opportunities for the more advanced students to help the weaker ones. Yes, certainly.
Okay, I don't know if there are any more questions. Patricia Diaz says, sometimes we've got students with special needs. I think it is necessary a specialist in class. What do you think about it?
A teacher who is helping, an extra teacher in the class, you mean, who's helping? That's wonderful. If you can do it, again, it comes down to money, doesn't it? I mean, if the school can afford it.
True.
But if they can afford it, yes, that's wonderful to have an assistant teacher in the classroom, or even a student, say from the local teacher training college or something. Anyone who can help you give the extra support to children who need it is really important.
Okay, Penny, I think that we have come to an end. Thank you so much for all of the tips. They are definitely very, very useful, especially for teachers nowadays that are facing actually lots of difficulties, not only an inclusive classroom, as you know, many challenges because of the pandemic. We really appreciate all of the tips that you have given us. And well, for the rest of you, let me remind you to join our next talk at 2:50. There's a break. And the next talk is Languages in Interaction During Childhood. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much. Goodbye to everybody, and enjoy the rest of the course. And I will send the PowerPoint presentation to you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.